There you go. You're on mute.
Okay,
Sorry, that's why he wasn't here.
okay. So John, we just went around the table and introduced ourselves and realized that we were on mute. So we've unmuted, and if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Representative John O'Brien. I represent Windsor Orange 1, that's Royalton and Tunbridge. I've also coached Ms. Gray's daughter in soccer.
Full disclosure. All right, well, so we are hoping to spend a little time just talking about and better understanding summer EBP as a concept, as a possible program. We had a half hour or so yesterday where Hunger Free Vermont came in and gave us some good background, I think, the fundamental understanding of what the situation is. We would be happy to have you go repeat any of what we heard yesterday, just because it's new. I think for many of us, for all of us, it's new. And I think that we've had that conversation. Some of us may have read a story in the paper. We may have heard a story on the radio. We may have heard from constituents who read or heard one of those stories and have concerns about why, at least our understanding is, Vermont decided not to participate in a program that many other states have decided to participate in. So if you would like to introduce yourselves in whatever order works for you, and if you'd like to just start, we will probably have questions, but we'd be happy to hear what you would like to say first.
Sure. So I'm Rosie Kruger. I'm the State Director of Child Nutrition Programs at the Agency of Education. And the way this program is set up, the program is a kind of a dual effort by two state agencies, the State Child Nutrition Agency and the State SNAP Agency.
Yes, and good morning. For the record, Miranda Gray, I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Economic Services Division.
So I did get a chance to listen to Honora's testimony from yesterday, and what she told you was about the program basics was correct. This is a $40 per month benefit in the summer months, equaling about $120 per child, that is based on the child's eligibility for free and reduced price school meals at school. And they need to be enrolled in a national school lunch program participating school in order to be eligible for the benefit and be determined to be eligible. So I know you all spent a lot of time over the past couple of years implementing Vermont's Universal Meals Law. And there are some ways that law interplays with this that makes it a little bit difficult to initially implement. And we've got some plans going forward. I want to start off by saying that if you've read the news stories, Vermont has been painted along with 15 other states as making this decision for political reasons. And that is very much not the case. I'm not a political appointee. I come to work every single day to feed kids. Like, this is a hugely important priority for me. And it was my recommendation that Vermont was not able and ready to participate in summer 2024 based on the complexities of the law, which was passed in late December of last year without a lot of input from states. And then the rule that USDA issued about how it should be implemented came out just this last December 28th. And we had to issue a letter of intent to participate by January 1st. And there are a whole bunch of complexities that make this very, very difficult to implement in Vermont. We very much want to, and we are working very hard to be ready to implement it well in summer 2025. And based on the extreme pressure that we're getting at this point to figure out why we can't participate in 2024, we are continuing to work with USDA as we have been since last summer. To try and figure out a way forward for 2024 based on our limitations. But I just want to be really clear that this was not at all a political decision. This is not at all about not seeing the value of the funds for families in need. We absolutely want to do this. It's just an extremely poorly poorly or difficultly written program for us to implement. And so we're trying to work through each of those things before saying that, yes, we can do this, because we don't want to be in the position of telling families to expect this benefit this summer and then not be able to give it to them. That would be far worse than telling them upfront that we're not able to give it to them. In the last few weeks, as we've been continuing to work with USDA to see if there's a way forward on 2024, it's become clear that that January 1st deadline, there is some flexibility there. So if we are able to find a path forward that's acceptable for USDA, then we would do that, and we're continuing to do that. But we don't want to tell families that we're going to be issuing this benefit without having that certainty that this is something we're able to do. I just got back from a conference in DC where I was working with my DCF counterpart, Leslie Wisdom, who's the SNAP state director, and her team. And we were there with our colleagues from all across the country, as well as anti-hunger advocates and USDA, trying to hash out the details of how we actually implement this. And I sat next to my counterpart from another state, a state director of child nutrition programs, who had the same issues that we're facing that I'll detail in a little bit. But her governor's office had not listened to their concerns. And in fact, they found out, they have all the same concerns that we do about 2024 implementation. They found out from the media that they would be implementing, and they did not have that dialogue with their governor's office. And they still don't know how they're going to do it. They don't think they're going to be able to do it. And they're very worried that they're going to have to tell families, in May, maybe even in June or July, that actually this benefit is not coming to you this year. And so we did not want to be in that position. We did not feel that that was fair to families. And so that's why we did that. There was a lot of pressure to issue a letter of intent anyway and figure it out. But I think you all saw those articles painted it as these states are doing it. And we didn't want to be included in that list if we didn't know that we could do it. So that's kind of just setting the stage for what's going on. I'd love to dig in with you to some of the difficulties that we're facing. They're complex. And so we can spend some time doing that today. And I also want to give Miranda, kind of some time to set the stage as well for what's going on in her agency.
Yeah, I mean, really, Rosie is the expert here, so I'm happy to help answer questions. I just know that we are committed to finding a path forward and are really committed to the summer 2025 and continue seeing what we can do for 2024. But I do think, not overpromising what we can do for families, because it is really challenging for them to count on something they aren't able to deliver. So I'm happy to have you dive into the details, and I'll add where I can.
Yeah. So one of the biggest problems that we have in Vermont when it comes to issuing this benefit is that we do not have a statewide student information system. So that would be a system where here at the State Agency of Education, we could look in real time to see this child is enrolled in this school. This is their address, their mailing address. This is their head of household name. This is, all the child's birth date, and this is their free and reduced meal eligibility status. We do collect some of that information twice a year, but it is a backwards looking collection, and it takes quite a while to get all that information from the schools and kind of collate it and make sure that it is all correct and eliminate all the issues. So we generally don't have a full comprehensive list of every child who attended and have that all validated until September of the year following the entire school year, the prior school year. The way that this law is written, we have to validate not only that a child was eligible for free and reduced meals, but that they were enrolled in a Vermont school participating in the National School Lunch Program. And if there are a number of ways for a child to become eligible, but if a child becomes eligible via submitting an application to the state agency, we need to be able to act on that application and issue the benefit to the child within 15 business days of getting that application. So we would need to be receiving in this application from a family, checking the income eligibility on it, and then going and making a match to say, yes, this child does attend a Vermont school or has attended at any point in the last year. And then after that, printing the card, issuing the benefit, mailing that card out, and all of that would have to happen within 15 business days. That's going to be challenging regardless, but it is extremely challenging not having that statewide student information system. And it would mean a lot of manually calling schools during summer months as we're receiving those applications to say, does this child go there? Does this, has this child been enrolled at any time? And that's just something that we're not, realistically, we're not able to do that. And it's a huge amount of work for the school staff as well. There are other ways. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if we, questions as we go?
Yeah.
Representative Paul?
Thank you, Rosie. I'm curious, have there been previous attempts, perhaps in budget proposals, to update the IT infrastructure and create this statewide?
Yeah, so
information system?
we actually have a statewide student information system in the works for school year 24-25. So that's why we're so confident that starting in school year 25 or summer 2025, we'll be able to do this. At that point, we'll be able to look kind of down into all the school student information systems in real time and see that, yes, this child attends. Yes, this is what their eligibility status is. And we'll be able to pull the mailing address and head of household that we need as well from those systems, which right now is not part of any data collection that we do.
And just to follow up, I think yesterday in that discussion, we talked about a number around $500,000. What is that?
That's for a DCF system.
Separate,
So
okay.
DCF, once all this information comes in, the Agency of Education is responsible for determining eligibility of the children. And then we pass that information over to DCF to actually issue the benefits. And so they need a records management system for issuing the benefits to be able to deduplicate all of the various ways that a child might be eligible to ensure that they're not issuing multiple benefits to the same child. That's where that 500,000 number is coming from. Separately, AOE, for this and other reasons, there are other reasons why a statewide student information system is helpful in the education world. So that's something that AOE has been working on already. We actually are using child nutrition funding, that's a NTIG grant from USDA, to develop part of that system to report the children's free and reduced eligibility status. And that's something that we decided to do before we really knew that summer EBT was happening. We had based on our experience with pandemic EBT, we knew that having a real-time system for child nutrition programs would be very helpful. And so I diverted some of that federal technology for child nutrition money to enhancing this statewide student information system. That is underway. It's a tech project. So, we're wanting to do it deliberately on the timeline that was planned and not rush it. And so school year 24-25 is when we are going to be able to implement it. But until then, we don't have that.
My last question on this topic would be, it's super exciting that this is going to happen in 24-25. But was this the first time your request had been responded to in the budget, in the governor's budget, to have that IT infrastructure update, or have there been previous years where you've requested this update in the past? Or was this new?
I think, so that's more on the tech side of AOE
Okay.
and not really where my field. My sense is that this has been in the works for a while. I don't know that funding was the issue. I mean, I think there were kind of general constraints about what is the right path forward? Are schools willing to share this information? Do we have the authority to get this information? All those sorts of questions, which seem to have been all worked out at this point, and that's why we're able to move forward. Certainly, the child nutrition money that we added to the program is helpful and meant that we didn't have to come with a bigger ask. But I don't think funding has been the thing holding back the AOE system. I can't speak to anything at DCF.
Is it all right so this is on the ESD side, this is the first time that we've asked for this funding, and that was because we needed to know what was going to be expected of us, which came in the interim final rule. So that is the one-time funds of $500,000 and then a base of $300,000, which is half of what we would get. So the federal government will give us the other 50%. So we're anticipating somewhere around $1 million for an IT system that can do this, and about $600,000 in administrative ongoing costs. And that was just a change as well from PBT, where the full administration of that had previously been covered, and now it is not. The state has to come up with half.
Thank you.
Representative Rice?
Yeah, so can you just help us understand, for the states that are going to be able to implement this in 2024, is it just that they have the statewide student information system in place? Is that sort of the
So that's, yeah, the states that are
setting aside the
confidently able to implement. So when we go to this conference and there are folks sitting up there from other states telling us all how they're planning to do it. All of the states that are being used as examples and saying, we have a path forward, this is what we're going to do. They all have statewide student information systems.
Do you have a sense of what the timeline of the implementation of those systems was in those states?
Those were existing systems.
Right, but
Yeah.
have they been existing for decades?
Yes, well, I don't know about decades, but
For a significant period of time.
yeah, going into PEBT, the other states that were able to quickly implement PEBT were states that all had statewide student information systems. We had some of these constraints with implementing pandemic EBT, which is a similar program, but not the same, just enough different to make it harder. And what we ended up doing with PEBT was collecting Excel spreadsheets from every single school and combining all of those, deduplicating all of those manually in an Access database, and then issuing a benefit based on that. And the folks that we work with at DCF spent so much time poring over those spreadsheets, and they caught a bunch of sorting issues. As you can imagine, when you're getting Excel spreadsheets from every school in Vermont and combining them, somewhere along the way, various people are hitting sort and not doing it correctly. And so they caught a bunch of issues before those benefits went out. But we were so close to making some significant errors there. And the reason we took that risk was that PEBT was a lot more money. We issued over $95 million in benefits to PEBT. And so kind of as a team of the program folks, we were like, we have to do this. We have to figure out a way to do it. And the Excel spreadsheets were what we did. Looking at summer EBT, we're talking about $4 million for this summer. And we don't feel that huge risk, in addition to that huge amount of staff time for us and the schools, is worth that for this summer. In addition to that huge risk and the time, that's going to be taking away all of our efforts to make a long-term system that works really well for families. We want to have a really smooth application process. You know, you can go to a mobile app on your phone and just apply very quickly in plain language. Have that information come to us, have that speak seamlessly to our student information system so that we can validate that, yes, this child goes to this school, and then get that information out and issue that benefit right away. That is our goal, and that's what we want to do for 25. Every moment we spend on manual processes for 24 means that we can't work on that.
Do you have a sense, though, for why we're so much further behind other states in terms of having these systems in place?
I think a little bit of that political, not political, but the idea of whether the state education agency is entitled to see that information in real time. Do people feel good about opening up their student information systems? I think adoption of student information systems at local levels has been slower just because it's a lot smaller. And so it is easier in Vermont to maintain your student records in manual files than use, PowerSchool or one of those big off-the-shelf student information systems. And so those are likely adopted more quickly in other states. Again, I'm speculating here. This is not really my area.
That's what I'm asking.
But Michigan is a state that was very quick to be able to implement PEBT, and they're also one of the example states with summer EBT. They have the EdFi system, which is a system of those. It's a way of those systems speaking to each other that we are adopting, and they have had it for many years. And so they were able to just tap into that and see who their students were and if they were eligible and how to contact them. And we just can't do that. But again, we're getting there.
So our interest is, our committee's interested in food in this instance. So summer EBT, the pandemic EBT program. What are there other reasons why a state might have a statewide student information system that predate the pandemic? Why else would if we weren't looking at the circumstances? What
So nutrition is not the primary reason you would have one of these. It would be about all of the education metrics about student performance and student poverty and student demographics that you might want when you're evaluating your education system. Funding, how many students go to this school, all of that, which we do through this twice a year manual data collection, which is a lot of work at the local level and at the state level to make sure that, this child is not showing up in two different schools and two schools are getting credit for that child. That's currently done fairly manually, and that's what we're hoping to eliminate. And I would speculate that we've been able to get away with that for longer because of the small size of our state. We're talking about 80,000 public school students in Vermont versus 80,000 in a district in another state.
Representative Wilson.
Do you have any mechanism being thought up of actually making sure once it's put in motion that an actual child actually eats the meal?
So this benefit, the summer EBT benefit, is it's a monetary benefit on a card. And the family gets the benefit, and they, like SNAP, are required to spend it on certain food items that are approved through SNAP. There's not, other than understanding that a child is part of a family and that the family is doing their grocery shopping with this card, there's not a particular, the food that you purchase is going to only go to feed that child in summer EBT. In the summer meals program, which is also administered by my team and is kind of it complements this program. Summer meals are available only to kids 18 and under. And so we talked last week about congregate settings. In a congregate meal setting, the child is showing up to get the meal. As we're experimenting with non-congregate, what we're doing is putting labels on the meals that say this meal is intended only for children 18 and under. And that's how we're ensuring that it's going to children. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering if a particular day, a particular child doesn't use the card, is the money still there for?
So the way it works is you would get, the household would get a card with $120 per summer per child. And they have a certain number, I think it's 4 months before expungement.
Sounds about right.
To spend that money, and they spend it at the grocery store or the farmer's market, or, only at places where you can buy food, and only on food products, the same as with SNAP.
Representative Rice.
Can you just dive into a little bit the differences between the pandemic EBT, the program that sent lots of families last summer cards, like you're describing, and this program, and sort of why this is more difficult to.
Yeah. So pandemic EBT had built into it, because it was an emergency program, the authority for USDA to give state agencies flexibility. And that was like part of the authorizing legislation. And so we asked for a lot of what are called simplifying assumptions when implementing pandemic EBT. And those allowed us to issue the benefit a lot more easily. USDA doesn't have the authority to grant those simplifying assumptions. So the flexibilities that they can grant are really limited this time around. And it seems like they're mostly around timing. So that 15-day period, maybe this summer they can be more flexible on that. Those sorts of flexibilities might be allowed this time around, but not previously. We also, I'm trying to think about, we got a lot of simplifying assumptions. I'm trying to think about all of them. So a big one is, in Vermont, we do universal meals. So the reason that almost every family with school-age children last summer got a card was that we had the flexibility that any child attending a CEP or Provision 2 school was considered eligible for the benefit. That's not true with summer EBT. With summer EBT, we have to validate that that child specifically is income eligible, rather than that they attend a school that is income eligible. So the way that looks is we have a lot of children who are directly certified. The vast majority of our children who would be eligible are directly certified. DCF already has all of that information because obviously they're the SNAP agency, so they already know who the SNAP children are. They're the TANF for Reach Up Vermont agency, so they already know who those children are. And they're in the same agency as the Department of Vermont Health Access, so they're able to easily get the Medicaid data as well about the children who are eligible for Medicaid. In pandemic EBT, we had some flexibilities to issue benefits to all of those kids. In summer EBT, we are allowed to issue benefits to those kids without checking to see whether they attend a school that offers the National School Lunch Program, only if the children are of the age of compulsory attendance in that state. In Vermont, our age of compulsory attendance is age 6 to 16. Other states are different. So some states are 5 to 18. Pennsylvania doesn't start their age of compulsory attendance till age 8. So across the country, even though the children are participating in the same federal programs that would make them eligible for this benefit, we're only allowed to use that simplifying assumption that they can have the benefit without us checking their school if they're of the age of compulsory attendance in that state. So that means for every 5-year-old, every pre-K child, every 17-year-old, and every 18-year-old, even though DCF already knows that that child is in a low-income family, we have to still check to make sure they attend a Vermont school that participates in the National School Lunch Program before we can issue that benefit. So it's just like kind of mind-boggling, like why it matters that the child is 17 and like a 17-year-old in Vermont will get the benefit wouldn't get the benefit automatically, but they would in New York State. So those are some of the areas where we've been really pushing back on USDA. This is an interim final rule that includes that requirement. And I will say that Congress didn't say anything about age of compulsory attendance in their law. They were looking at school-age children. And last week, Leslie and I actually were part of a bunch of state agency staff from a number of different states who met with congressional staff from the congressional committees who are involved in this. And we presented that to them as a problem. And they were shocked. They were like, we didn't mean for a kid to be kicked off when they turned 17. We meant for it to be school-age children, which they were thinking, 5 to 18. So we will be issuing comments to USDA on their interim final rule saying that we think this is completely inappropriate, that you've set this standard for compulsory age of attendance. But that doesn't help us for summer 24. So we still, if we are to issue the benefits in summer 24, we can go ahead and issue those benefits for the 6 to 16-year-olds, no problem. But the 5, 17, and 18-year-olds and the pre-K children, we still need to match on schools. So one of the number of flexibilities we'll be asking USDA for to see if we can potentially do summer 24 is to allow us to make that simplifying assumption for 5 to 18-year-olds. We're not sure that that's something they're going to be allowed to give us because it's very clearly not what is in their interim final rule. And it is something that will cost the federal government more money. So they're usually only able to give us waivers when we can say definitively that it won't cost the federal government more money. There will probably be a few additional kids, a couple hundred additional kids who are not enrolled in school, but are in SNAP, Medicaid, or TANF who get the benefit. And so it will cost the federal government more money, and it will probably mean that they can't approve that flexibility. So those are some examples. I can go into more, but those are a lot of the nuances and that make it very difficult.
Representative O'Brien behind you joined us and had a question.
Just a general question. Are SNAP cards and EBT cards, are they available to be used everywhere in the country? So, I mean, specifically in Vermont, so many of us shop, say, in the Upper Valley or go to a market basket, and also say it's a family in Haverhill that wants to shop at the Brattleboro Co-op. Like, those are all allowed, or if I go on vacation with my family, I could use it in, Hampton Beach.
Yes, as long as sorry, I'm assuming you can see me, but yes, the EBT cards can be used in participating stores across the states.
And across the country?
Right. So as long as the store, I'm sure that we have some vendors who might not accept them, but I think those that do, then yes, you can.
That does raise another interesting issue about one of the difficulties with the way that this law is written, though, the regulations. Because USDA says states are responsible for ensuring that there is not dual issuance to a family, that a child doesn't get the summer EBT benefit in Vermont and also get it in New Hampshire. And that is very challenging because a child is eligible for summer EBT if they attended a Vermont school at any point in the school year. And they would also be eligible in New Hampshire if they attended a New Hampshire school at any point in the school year. And there's not currently a system for us to check those kids with the other states. And so that was a question that we raised to USDA this week was how realistically can we do this? And I think where we're going to end up is just putting something in the letter to families saying, if you received a benefit from both states, don't use it from both states. But it's not clear if that will meet their consideration of prohibiting dual issuance of the benefit. So it's a brand new program, and there's a lot of nuances that USDA and Congress have not thought about when issuing the law and the regulations. And one of the reasons we were very cautious about summer 24 was we knew each of these questions was going to have to go to USDA. We're going to have to hammer it out, figure out what a realistic way of dealing with it is, or get them to change the regulation if there isn't a way forward. And that can't happen between now and the end of May, which is when we're supposed to be putting that benefit, like it's supposed to be in families' hands at the end of May. So,
Representative Paul?
And the new software that will not be able to track the dual attendance across different states, or will be?
I don't think so. I think that's going to be a separate issue that we're going to have to deal with. And again, we're hoping that if we just, say to families, you're not supposed to get the benefit from two states, that's enough to meet that part of the regulation, but that's untested. So we'll put that in our plan and we'll see what they say. And if not, we're not sure what to do, because if a child moves out of Vermont, they're entitled to the Vermont benefit, even if they go somewhere else. It's just that they're not entitled to the Vermont benefit plus the benefit from another state. So it's not just, did you move to New Hampshire? It's, did you move to New Hampshire and enroll in a New Hampshire school and become eligible through that New Hampshire school? Many New Hampshire schools don't participate in the National School Lunch Program. So if the child went to a New Hampshire school that doesn't participate in the National School Lunch Program, they would still be eligible for the Vermont benefit. So it's just very, and this is just one part of the 197 pages of the regulations that we have to parse through and figure out, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with this?
This might be naive of me, but I imagine there is a database where you see a child or their family has applied for a card and received it. And so their name would be in that database. So no. So, but they have AOE has to, issue that card. So wouldn't that be kind of on record that they were issued a card?
What the $500,000 is to set up that system at DCF. We've just been focusing on the problems at AOE. There's a lot of problems, for DCF to get this going as well.
Okay. So it sounds like that could be addressed through this.
Those systems don't talk to each other across states.
Okay.
So it wouldn't deal with the dual issuance.
Thank you.
Being a national.
Well, that may have been in some of the suggestions that states made to USDA. Each state needs to set up their own application system. So we didn't really talk about how a child becomes eligible completely. One way that they become eligible is through direct issuance, that they are participating in one of those programs. They are the age of compulsory attendance. Then DCF can just go ahead and issue the benefit without talking to AOE. Those are the students that we're very confident that we could issue the benefit for this summer, and they account for the vast majority of the students who would be eligible. That's what we initially proposed to USDA back in September. And that's what they've can we just issue the benefit to those kids? Because we know we could do that, no problem. DCF feels like, that would be just kind of added to existing benefit cards and would be pretty doable. we quickly got no, our lawyers won't let you opt into the program if you can't make the benefit available to every single child who could be eligible. So we keep asking that question in different ways and saying, well, what if we did this? What if we gave this option? But so far it's been a no. So that's the main way that children are going to become eligible. Then there are children who attend a school that participates in the National School Lunch Program and qualify for free and reduced price meals at that school through a way other than direct certification. So this could be one of the independent schools in Vermont that participates in the National School Lunch Program, but doesn't participate in universal meals. So those schools are still charging for meals and they're still collecting applications. All those families at those schools that qualify via an application, we need to get the information from those schools and push that information over to DCF. And it's not just the child's name, it's also their mailing address and their head of household, so that they know who to send the card to. So that's another group. Another group would be children who attend schools that participate in both universal meals or in the National School Lunch Program and universal meals. And they've qualified as directly certified through a local means of direct certification. So this would be Head Start, Migrant Education Program, homeless. These are the other methods where if a children is in that category, they're automatically eligible and considered directly certified, but it's not necessarily the information that DCF has. So that is information that we need to get from the local level. Again, we'll get through this new student information system, and we need to push that over to DCF as well. And finally, for children who attend a universal meals school, but have not qualified through one of these means because they didn't need to submit an application because they were a CEP school or a Provision 2 school not in their base year, the state needs to make available an application. And so the plan right now is for DCF to make that application available. Families will apply. We're hoping to have an electronic version as well as a paper version and have it translated and really readily available for families. Families will apply. DCF will check to make sure that they meet the income criteria. And then if they do meet the income criteria, that's when the information has to be bounced over to AOE to check to make sure that they attend a National School Lunch Program school. We'll confirm that and will be sent back to DCF. Also, all of those children need to be deduplicated because you can easily imagine that a child would be eligible through a variety of different ways. A family may submit an application thinking like better safe than sorry, and we need to make sure to not issue the benefit more than once to the same child. So that's, again, we think we've got a plan for 25, but I think you're starting to see why 24 looks really, really difficult. And so we've told USDA, we think we can do that direct issuance part. If you gave us a simplifying assumption for kids 5 to 18, even better. One of the things we're looking at proposing now is, can we do the direct issuance and make an application available to families, but just have families attest that they attend a National School Lunch Program school and not actually do the check that they attend a school. And we'll see if USDA goes for that. They were lukewarm on that when we proposed it this week verbally. So that would mean that every family would theoretically have an avenue. It would mean collecting more applications than we needed because theoretically a lot of those kids could have become eligible through their schools. But it might allow us to go ahead and be able to issue that benefit to the vast majority of kids who are eligible.
I'm not sure whether we asked a question and you've been answering a question. You have been, whether you've gotten to the end of your.
I want to make sure that you all have all your questions, because certainly you're hearing from lots of constituents who are, reading these articles that Vermont has chosen not to do this for ideological reasons. And I want you to have all the information so that you can respond to those. The other thing I guess I'd like to tell you about is what could you do to be helpful going forward? And this is an interim final rule. So there is a comment period through April. And I think comments on the age of compulsory attendance would be really helpful. Comments asking USDA to give states as much flexibility as possible, perhaps around that dual issuance area. We will certainly be submitting comments from the state agencies, and we're happy to, as we get those written out, share those with you all for your own comments. But I think hearing from as many folks as possible would be really helpful on that, so that in the long run, this becomes a little bit easier to implement. And then there are some asks in the governor's budget for funding, mostly on the DCF side. Because as I mentioned, we're already doing the student information system work at the agency. So if all of that works out and we don't have to implement till 25, it should be, we're still doing our estimates, but it shouldn't take a ton of additional resources at AOE, and it'll mostly be on the DCF side.
So just to, well, first of all, I wanted to say, I appreciate your confidence in our ability to understand all of the detail that you've gone through. And I think because of the work we did last year, to a certain extent, we are able to, we're not working in it every day the way you are, but I think that it's not, that we're not swimming in a sea of what does all that jargon mean? So,
And I don't want you to be. So if I've said anything that didn't, feel free to ask.
you know, I think you would have gotten questions if there had been questions. Committee, you know, there are things we need to clarify. Maybe it would be helpful just to talk about FY 25 and the budget again, just to be sure that we understand what's there and what it would be paying for, and whether whether the funding is enough, would be enough to get us, given the current interpretation of the rule, to a point where we could implement it for FY 25. So
I'm going to let Miranda talk about that, because most of the ask is on the DCF side.
It is, yeah. So we have a one-time $500,000 ask, and that is to help support our IT system. And then we have a base ask of $300,000, and that's to support the administration of the program. The benefit itself is 100% federally funded.
So the base of 300,000 new money for the base, that would then be the 50% that states have to contribute to the administrative costs to the program, and that is, so that's estimating a $600,000 cost for administering the program annually going forward. Okay, Representative Rice.
My recollection of Honora's testimony yesterday about that $500,000 is that she seemed to categorize it as somewhat of a patch, or can you just, is it sort of, is that $500,000 what's needed to really stand up the system that will be sort of future proofed to make sure that as these things come down the line, we're not in the same position again of sort of not being able to jump in and be one of those states that is set up to do it? Or is there more needed to?
So given the timing of when we got the interim final rule and then our budget asks, this is our best guess at this moment. And we have to go through a procurement process. So we'll have to put out a request for proposal or request for information to understand. We're also looking at what other states are using for technology. And is there any way to be able to purchase that technology versus build it ourselves or have a vendor come in? So today, all I can say is like, this is what we think that we need. But I guess I wouldn't promise that I wouldn't be coming back to say like, I was off by $120,000.
We did hear patch, I think, which sounds temporary and not, comprehensive.
And I am wondering if it's set a patch just because the Economic Services Division, along with the Department of Vermont Health Access, is building IE&E. I'm not sure if this committee is familiar with that. It's an integrated eligibility system where we're trying to simplify when people are applying for healthcare, SNAP benefits, TANF, everything that we do. And so that ideally, we are going to purchase something that will be able to connect into that system. But because we are procuring or looking for one and building out the specs for the other, I think that's where the patch word maybe had come in, unless.
I listened to that testimony, and I think she was talking about the general eligibility system and the issues with that system, and correctly saying that what we're talking about for the 500,000 is not not related to that system. It's a standalone system that would allow us to implement. And again, this is your, but that was my understanding from listening to her testimony yesterday.
Then that could be, we do have a very old IT system that we are currently operating out of. And that's why we are looking to build a new system.
Is that also in the budget for FY 25?
That is, I think the budgetary needs for that are all set. It has been a project for several years.
Okay. That's the first. And then, so then on the education side, there's also funding requested in the budget for the student information system.
So I think the student information system is my sense is that that's covered. It's possible that we will come back to you with additional staff requests, staff time requests, because my team is all federally funded and we're not allowed to use any of that funding for summer EBT. And so far, we haven't hired anybody new to work on summer EBT. I've been doing this work and I've been coding my time to some general funds that you all have given us for other work and coding that work to federal, moving some money around to make sure that it all works. It's possible that going forward, if, we're still figuring this out, if we determine that, yes, we do in fact need somebody at the agency whose job is to call a school and say, does this child go here? Then of course we would need to come back to you for funding on that. At this point, based on what we're planning to do, it looks like once we have that statewide student information system, and once that is tied into the system that DCF is standing up, that there really wouldn't be that much work on the AOE side. And so we would be able to kind of handle it with existing staff. But again, that's very preliminary. And so we may need to come back and say, actually, it is, as we develop this plan further, it is going to take some additional people.
So the student information system is happening, has been.
Yes, it's happening regardless.
Yeah, there's already been funding in the previous year to the extent that funding was needed. Yeah, okay. Just going back to the administrative costs, the 300,000 that's in the DCF budget. What does that cover? Is that personnel?
Personnel, it's actually purchasing of the cards. To be able to put money onto cards, there's a fee to be able to do that. It's envelopes, stamps, everything that is associated with operating.
You know how many people in terms of personnel would be needed?
So we were able to issue the PEBT with limited service positions. So that is what our plan is, as well as to for summer 2025, is to just be able to bring staff on to be able to help support, answer questions about how to use your card for the first time, set the PIN, et cetera.
Representative Cole is next.
That was basically my question, but just to further elaborate, does that base funding, the 300K, is that, could that be supportive of any other program in addition to the summer EBT program, or is that just strictly help for summer EBT?
It would just be help for summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a clarifying question. So my understanding is that the federal funds can cover 50% of the administrative costs. Can you just?
Yeah, so our existing federal streams that we get to operate the child nutrition programs, we can't use any of that money as the. So we need presumably state general fund to act as the match. And right now, the way I've been dealing with that is, we have a little bit of state general fund. You several years ago appropriated made a position to deal with a local foods incentive. That's all state general fund funded. That position, the work that position does is also work that is an allowable use of that federal funding, of the child nutrition federal funding. So we're looking at, can we kind of swap those funds?
But if the system were up and once the system is up and running, there would be some federal funds coming to support administration.
50%, yeah.
You mentioned limited service position when asked about employment positions. Does that imply that people within the department are just going to be transferred into a different position, or what does that mean?
So we had brought on, just as an example, this summer when we were sending out all of those cards to all of the families, we brought on a team to just be able to kind of have like a mini housing is what I usually talk about.
Yeah.
A mini call center. So that way we were able to answer the questions of Vermonters about why did I get this card? How do I set up the PIN?
They're not permanent.
They're not
employees.
permanent. So it's just, we can kind of anticipate a time when we would have
Right.
more questions or when we have to get all the mailings out. So when we have to get the initial surge of cards out, like that is a time, when we might need to bring on more staff, as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? So, again, I just want to be sure that I understand that, aside from the funding, if the funding is in place by the time we pass a budget, are there any other concerns, any other roadblocks that you can foresee for FY 25, given the current rules that you're trying to navigate?
I mean, I think that the age of compulsory attendance, if we could get that changed at the federal level, that would make things a lot easier. And so, again, your help in writing comments and pressuring the federal delegation as well, which we've been having a lot of conversations with them as well. But it doesn't hurt to hear more voices on that. That would be very helpful. And I think just, you're all understanding that we are trying for 24. And if we don't get there, this is why. And I think it is really those news stories simplifying it as just a lack of desire those are very easy to write and not at all accurate when it came to Vermont. So your help explaining that to the public that, this is what's going on. We really, really want to do it. But we also want to do it right.
I think it's important I think one angle is the lack of desire, and obviously like it's not an enviable list of states and quotes from other governors to be included on.
Yeah.
But also like I think in this room have heard from you enough to know that probably it's not a lack of desire on your part. And so I think the lack of capacity and systems is also a really important thing for us to understand. And sort of like that is, if that is a roadblock too, understanding why the systems sort of weren't in place is important. And I think that was sort of part of those stories too. It's like, it's not just like, oh, Vermont's this place that doesn't want to feed children. It's also like Vermont is a state that for a number of reasons maybe isn't quite up to where we should be in terms of our systems and capacity to stand up these programs.
And my sense from talking to the other states is that other states are also in that. Like, we're not uniquely behind in that. It's just that in other states, the politics has won out. And so they're going to be cobbling it together with duct tape and rubber bands next summer. And that's that we are facing the same struggles as a lot of other states. There are those handful of states that do have that system that are going to do it without, it's still going to be challenging for them, but it's, as any new program would be, but it's not going to be the challenge that it would be for us.
So for FY 24, then again, you have been trying to get somebody to change their mind. Sounds like you're going to continue working those channels. Is it ultimately going to need Congress to do something, or is it really the USDA interpreting, or some combination?
I think it's probably some combination. Our sense right now from speaking to USDA is that they don't think they have the authority to grant all of the flexibilities that we're looking for. I think some pressure from Congress would help them to see that maybe they do have more flexibility there. But a lot of it is going to be, USDA deciding that, yes, they can give us this flexibility or no, they can't. But certainly if Congress were to do something, that would be very helpful. And we, like I mentioned, we did meet with those congressional staff from the various committees last week to highlight a couple of things. The messaging we got from them was basically that there's no legislative vehicle for for any changes to go through on it. We were encouraging them to at least write a letter to USDA regarding the age of compulsory attendance, since it was very clear that that was not their intent. I don't know if that will happen, but that's the ask that we've made.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we might be an outlier, that the other states that didn't sign the letter don't want to do it. So, it's hard to get people to act if there's not
There,
People saying what you're saying.
yeah, there are a lot of states who opted in who are in our same position, and my counterparts in those states are trying really hard to figure something out. But I would expect that those states will have a lot of difficulty pulling it off. Yeah, but you're right, that nobody's out there, nobody else is out there publicly talking about those challenges, that it's really kind of behind the scenes.
Yes, Representative Graham.
What would be the drop dead date that you would have to have these rule changes to like do something in 2024? I mean, there's gotta be a time where we just can't. Even if we got everything we want.
I think yeah, it depends on what flexibility they can, I mean, maybe we could issue the benefit in December if, we get the flexibility, the rule changes or flexibilities later. It depends on kind of how late do we want to go, and the judgment call about how much are we willing to take away from those long-term efforts from summer 2025. And also, frankly, from, I am also the person who's working on trying to expand our non-congregate summer meal sites this summer. That's on my team as well. And you heard from me last week that we have a huge opportunity there. And so we don't want to miss out on that. So there's a little bit of a judgment call about, how much effort do we continue to put into this for 24? And we're just going to have to, as we go along, kind of continue to make that judgment call about, it seems like we've got a path forward. It seems like we don't. It seems like it's going to take this amount of effort, and that's going to take away from summer meals and other things. So I don't have a good answer for you.
You have a staff?
I have 9 folks who work for me on child nutrition programs. They each have their own. We do summer meals. We do the school meals programs. We do child and adult care food program, meal program. And we do USDA foods for schools and for the food bank. And we also do farm to school work and local foods incentive. So I do have a team. They're all,
I guess I knew that.
they have other work. And so summer EBT has mostly been me. I have one team member that I had kind of pulled in off of school meals stuff during PEBT to do a lot of the actual phone calls to schools. And I may need to pull her in to work on this, which means there's just a lot less ability to help schools work through all the various issues that they have with school meals. So it's always a balancing act about where to put your resources.
Representative O'Brien?
I just wondered how does the federal government set aside funds for, say, summer EBT? Because it seems like if 15 states said they can't do it, they don't have capacity or a will, and then a whole mess of other states don't have capacity, but they're like, we're going to wing it somehow, we're going to figure this out, and then a few of the Michigan type states are ready to go. I mean, maybe I'm cynical, but I also think that sometimes it seems like the USDA may make this incredibly complicated so that that it's actually, they save money, by making it so hard that a lot of federal dollars are sort of, left in their accounts.
I don't know how the accounting works at the federal level. My sense is not that USDA is making this hard so that states don't participate. It's more a lack of the amount of, they haven't had time to think through all of the steps of implementing this new program and consult with the states. And so they've done the best that they can. That has, caused a lot of difficulties for us. It isn't all we need. But I don't think that with the current USDA administration, I don't think that's the intent, based on the conversations that we're having with them.
Well, that's good to hear. But it would be interesting also if they must have estimates for how many, states potentially could be involved in this, and then how many students, and add those numbers up. And I would assume set aside a budget for that.
Yeah, I haven't dug into the details about all of how all of that funding works at the federal level, so I can't really speak to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, both of you, for providing that insight. Good to know. All right.